Commander Jake Sullivan stood by the large window on the ISS Gateway station. Below him, Earth turned slowly in the darkness of space. The planet looked like a beautiful blue marble hanging in the black void. It was his favorite view in the whole solar system. Every time he looked at it, he remembered why humans had left their home planet and traveled to the stars. The year was 2187. Humans had spread across the solar system like seeds blown by the wind. On Mars, people lived in huge domes that protected them from the harsh environment. In the asteroid belt, miners worked day and night pulling valuable metals from floating rocks. Around Jupiter's moons, research stations studied the mysteries of the giant planet. But Earth was still the heart of everything. It was home to 4 billion people and connected everyone living in space. That morning started like any other normal day. Lieutenant Karen Brooks sat at her station on the bridge, watching the communication screens. Messages flew back and forth across space. Supply ships reported when they would leave port. Mining crews asked for new equipment. Families sent letters to loved ones across the dark. Everything seemed normal. Nothing suggested that the universe was about to change forever. Then something happened at exactly 0847 hours, universal time. Every single message from Earth stopped, not slowly, not with warning signals or calls for help. 1 second, millions of voices filled the radio waves. The next second, there was only silence. Complete, absolute, terrifying silence. Karen's hands moved quickly across her control panel. She checked the systems. She rebooted the receivers. She tried everything she could think of to explain the sudden quiet. But her equipment worked perfectly. The silence was real. Earth had simply gone quiet. Commander, we have a serious problem. All communications from Earth have stopped. Complete blackout. Karen's voice stayed calm even though fear grew in her stomach. Jake turned away from the window. His reflection showed in the glass like a ghost. Is it our equipment? No, sir. Our systems work fine. The problem is on their end. They're just not there anymore. For 3 long hours, the crew tried everything they could think of. They searched different radio frequencies. They checked emergency channels. They even tried the quantum-entangled backup systems that should have been impossible to interrupt. Nothing worked. Earth had gone completely silent. Then Dr. Henry Cole ran onto the bridge. He was the station's chief scientist. His hands shook as he held his tablet. His face had gone pale. It's gone. Henry's voice cracked as he spoke. Earth is gone. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean, gone? That's impossible. Henry pulled up a video feed on the main screen. It showed the space where Earth should have been, where it had always been since the beginning of time. The feed was live and current. There could be no mistake. Where Earth should have been spinning was nothing. No planet, no pieces of rock. No sign that anything had ever existed in that spot at all. Just empty space and distant stars shining in the darkness. The moon was still there. But without Earth's gravity holding it in place, the moon's orbit had started to change. It would drift away into space over time, but Earth itself was gone. Home to 3 billion people, countless cities, deep oceans, tall mountains, and green forests had all vanished into nothing. Check the old recordings. Jake's mind refused to believe what his eyes told him. Pull up all the data we have. There must be an explanation. Planets don't just disappear, but there was no explanation that made sense. Every sensor in the solar system said the same thing. Every telescope showed the same empty space. Every piece of monitoring equipment confirmed the impossible truth. Earth had disappeared, not blown up, not moved to a different location, just gone, as if someone had reached into reality and erased it completely. The remaining human population lived on Mars, in the asteroid belt, and around Jupiter's moons. Altogether, they numbered only about 1 billion people. Every single one of them had just become a refugee. They had lost their home world and didn't know why or how. Jake stood frozen, staring at the empty space on the screen. Around him, his crew began to panic. Some people cried. Others sat in shocked silence. A few started making frantic calls to family members on other stations, hoping desperately that someone had a different answer. We need to tell everyone. Karen's voice brought Jake back to reality. All the colonies need to know what's happened. They'll see it themselves soon enough, but we should be the ones to tell them. Jake nodded slowly. Send out the message. Tell them Earth is gone. Tell them we don't know why. Tell them we're going to figure this out. But even as he gave the orders, Jake wondered how anyone could figure out what had happened. How did you investigate the disappearance of an entire planet? Where did you even start? What humanity didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know yet, was that Earth's disappearance had been noticed far beyond their little solar system. In the vast galactic community that existed beyond human knowledge, powerful beings had taken action. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Council of Aligned Civilizations felt something they rarely experienced. They felt afraid. The Council had made many decisions over the millennia. They had guided young civilizations. They had prevented wars. They had maintained peace across thousands of worlds. But taking Earth had been different. It had been automatic. The ancient protocols had activated when human expansion reached certain levels. The systems had judged humanity as potentially dangerous. The quarantine had been enacted before anyone could debate whether it was the right choice. Now the Council watched and waited. They had expected the remaining humans to die quickly without their homeworld. The colonies weren't meant to survive alone. Within a few months, maybe a year at most, humanity would be extinct. The problem would solve itself. The protocols would be proven correct once again. But something unexpected was about to happen. Something the ancient protocols had never predicted. Something that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity was about to show everyone what it meant to survive against impossible odds. They were about to prove that taking Earth hadn't eliminated the threat. It had only made humanity more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. 6 months passed after Earth vanished from space. Humanity stood on the edge of complete collapse. Every day brought new problems. Every week made survival seem more impossible. But somehow, against all logic and reason, humans kept going. On Mars, Governor Lisa Campbell sat in her office and stared at food supply reports. The numbers made her stomach hurt. The Red Planet's farming domes had been built to grow extra food, not to feed everyone. Without regular supply ships from Earth, they had maybe 2 years before people started starving. 2 years to figure out how to grow enough food for millions of people on a dead planet. The asteroid belt colonies faced different problems, but just as serious. Chief Engineer Paul Grant worked 18 hours every day trying to turn mining equipment into farming tools. They were hollowing out asteroids and turning them into greenhouses. It was creative and desperate and probably not enough, but they had to try. Strange things started happening, though. Things that shouldn't have worked began to work. Solutions that seemed impossible somehow succeeded. Humanity wasn't breaking apart like everyone expected. Instead, people were adapting in ways that surprised even themselves. On Europa Station, which orbited one of Jupiter's moons, Dr. Amy Rodriguez had been running a small experiment with underwater farming. The moon had a huge ocean hidden under its ice. She had been studying it for years. Now her tiny research project became a lifeline. She figured out how to grow protein-rich algae in the dark waters. The amount of food she could produce shouldn't have been possible with their limited equipment, but somehow it worked. We're making it happen, Amy told Jake during one of their weekly video calls. Don't ask me to explain how. We're breaking every rule we learned about sustainable farming. We're running on empty tanks and pure hope, but we're actually making it happen. Similar stories came from every corner of human space. Engineers built machines that shouldn't work. Scientists created solutions with equipment that was never meant for such tasks. Ordinary people did extraordinary things because giving up wasn't an option. Humanity had lost its birthplace, and instead of dying, it learned how to truly live. The social problems were just as bad as the physical ones. There were riots on Mars when food ran low. People in the asteroid belt started hoarding supplies. Panic spread through every station and colony. Fear made people do terrible things to each other. For a while it seemed like humanity would destroy itself even if starvation didn't. But then something changed. People started helping each other. Colonies with extra supplies shared them with colonies that had nothing. Strangers volunteered for dangerous jobs to help communities they had never visited. New friendships formed across millions of miles of space. People who had been competitors before Earth vanished became partners in survival. Losing everything had a way of showing people what really mattered. And what mattered was taking care of each other. What mattered was making sure everyone survived, not just yourself. What mattered was building something new from the ashes of what was lost. Jake spent those months coordinating everything. He talked to colony leaders. He helped solve disputes. He made impossible decisions about who got supplies and who had to wait. Every day brought new crises. Every day gave him new reasons to give up. But every single day he chose to keep fighting. He wasn't alone. Karen worked beside him, managing communications and keeping everyone connected. Henry and his science team searched for answers about what had happened to Earth. Lisa on Mars organized food production. Paul in the Belt created new technologies from old equipment. Amy on Europa fed thousands with her underwater farms. Everyone did their part. Everyone contributed. That's how humanity survived. Then one day, Captain Steve Miller was flying a routine patrol mission in the outer solar system. His ship was called the Magellan, and he had been mapping debris fields near Neptune's orbit. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. That day his sensors picked up something strange, something that definitely wasn't natural, something that wasn't human technology either. Gateway Station, this is the Magellan. Steve's voice came through the communication system with barely controlled excitement. You need to see what we found. I think we just discovered we're not alone in the universe. The object was a probe. It was clearly artificial and definitely not made by humans. Its design was too strange, too advanced. Steve's crew carefully brought it aboard their ship and transported it back to Gateway Station under maximum security. Nobody knew what it was or what it meant, but everyone knew it was important. Henry and his team of scientists worked for weeks studying the probe. They examined every inch of it. They ran countless tests. Slowly, carefully, they learned how to communicate with it. They decoded its language. They accessed its data, and when they finally understood the message it carried, everyone's understanding of the universe changed forever. The galaxy was full of intelligent life. Not just a few species, but hundreds of different civilizations, thousands of populated worlds, all of them connected through something called the Galactic Council. These alien species had technology that made human achievements look primitive. They could travel faster than light. They could manipulate energy in ways humans had only dreamed about. Some could even change reality itself, and they had taken Earth. They had made it disappear. The message in the probe was formal and polite, like a letter from a lawyer. It explained that Earth had been considered too dangerous to leave alone. Human aggression worried them. The speed of human expansion across the solar system worried them. How quickly humans develop new technology worried them. Ancient automatic systems had been triggered. The planet had been placed in something called dimensional stasis. It was quarantined from normal space until humanity either matured enough to be safe or died out completely. The aliens had meant to be kind. They thought they were being merciful. They wanted to preserve Earth and its people while protecting the rest of the galaxy from potential human danger. They had simply made one small mistake. They hadn't checked if any humans were living away from Earth when they activated the quarantine. They hadn't considered that 1 billion people might be scattered across the solar system. They hadn't thought about what would happen to those people when their homeworld vanished. The probe included more than just an explanation. It also contained coordinates, a location in deep space where the Galactic Council met. An invitation of sorts, though not a very friendly one. Humans could come and ask for Earth's return. They could plead their case before the Council. Maybe, if they begged well enough, the aliens would give their planet back. Jake read the translated message 3 times. Each time he felt anger and hope fighting inside his chest. The aliens had taken Earth because they were afraid of humans. They had trapped 3 billion people in a bubble outside reality because they thought humanity was dangerous. And now they were offering a chance to ask nicely for everything back. But Jake also felt something else. He felt determination, because humanity had survived 6 months that should have killed them. They had built new lives from nothing. They had proven that losing Earth wasn't the end of their story. And now they had a target. Now they knew where to go and what to do. Plot a course to those coordinates. Jake's voice was quiet but firm. We're going to meet this council. We're going to tell them what they did, and we're going to get our planet back. Not by begging, not by pleading, but by showing them that humanity doesn't quit, ever. Building a spaceship that could reach the Galactic Council took everything humanity had left. Every colony contributed. Every station donated materials. Every person sacrificed something to make it possible. They called the ship the Victory, though some people thought that name was too optimistic. The Victory was built from spare parts gathered from across the solar system. They took engines from mining ships. They pulled shields from old military vessels. They stripped life support systems from 12 different stations. The ship looked like someone had welded together pieces of 20 different spacecraft. It wasn't pretty, but engineer Paul Grant promised it would work. She'll hold together, Paul told Jake as they walked through the ship before launch. She might shake and rattle and make scary noises, but she'll get you there and back. I guarantee it. The crew was small because they couldn't afford to send many people. 15 humans would represent the entire remaining population. Jake commanded the mission with Karen as his second-in-command. Henry came along as the chief scientist. They also brought diplomats who could speak well, soldiers who could fight if necessary, and support staff to keep everything running. These 15 people carried the hopes and fears of a billion souls on their shoulders. Launch day arrived. Every surviving human watched the broadcast as the Victory powered up her engines and pulled away from Gateway Station. Some people prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Others cried tears of hope and fear. Everyone watched and wondered if they would ever see these 15 brave people again. The journey to the council took 6 months. 6 long months of breathing recycled air and eating protein paste. 6 months of staring at the same walls and the same faces. 6 months of floating through the vast emptiness between stars with nothing but hope to keep them going. The alien probe had included basic instructions for faster-than-light travel. The technology was far beyond anything humans had developed on their own. But the instructions were clear enough. They could build an engine that would let them cross the galaxy. It wouldn't be fast compared to what the aliens used, but it was enough to get humanity to the council. During the journey, Henry and his science team studied everything the probe had taught them. They learned about galactic civilization. They read about its history and structure. They discovered how the aliens organized their society. What they learned was both impressive and disturbing. The Galactic Council had existed for 50,000 years. That was longer than human civilization had existed. The Council maintained peace across thousands of worlds through overwhelming military power and strict rules. Young civilizations like humanity were watched carefully. They were guided along certain paths. Sometimes, if they seemed too dangerous, they were contained. Everything was orderly and rational and completely without mercy for anyone who threatened the established system. Humanity had been marked as dangerous because they expanded too fast and developed technology too quickly. The Council's automatic monitoring systems had flagged humans as a potential threat. Ancient protocols had activated. The quarantine of Earth had been enacted by computers following rules written thousands of years ago. Nobody had debated whether it was right or wrong. The system had simply done what it was programmed to do. "They're afraid of us," Henry explained to the crew during one of their planning meetings. "We grew too fast. We spread across the solar system too quickly. To them, we look like a disease that needs to be stopped before it spreads further. Are they wrong to be afraid?" Karen asked the question everyone was thinking. Maybe we are dangerous. Maybe we do expand too aggressively. Maybe they made the right choice. Nobody had a good answer. The question hung in the air like smoke. Were humans dangerous? Would they have threatened other species if allowed to continue expanding? Had the Council actually saved the galaxy from a future catastrophe? Or had they just punished humanity for being ambitious and curious? When the Victory finally arrived at the Council's coordinates, what they saw took their breath away. The location wasn't a planet or a space station. It was something that seemed impossible. The Nexus was a structure the size of a solar system. Artificial worlds and rings of pure energy surrounded a controlled black hole. Millions of ships moved through organized traffic lanes. The casual display of power and technology made humanity's greatest achievements look like cave paintings. My God. Helen Foster, their xenobiologist, whispered as she stared at the view screen. "We're so far behind them. We're like insects compared to this. How can we possibly negotiate with beings who can build something like this? We're insects that survived losing our nest," Jake reminded her. "We're insects that crossed the galaxy in a ship built from scrap. We're insects that refused to die when everything said we should. That has to count for something." Several alien ships approached to escort them. These escort vessels were sleek and powerful. They made the Victory look even more pathetic than it already did. But there was something in how the aliens approached that suggested caution. They weren't contemptuous. They weren't dismissive. They were wary. The Council knew what had happened to humanity after Earth vanished. They were curious about what would happen next. The Victory was given permission to dock at one of the outer stations. They were also given a schedule. In 3 days, humanity would have its chance to address the full Council. 3 days to prepare their arguments. 3 days to figure out how to convince beings 50,000 years more advanced that humans deserve their planet back. The crew spent those 3 days in intense preparation. They wrote speeches. They created presentations with graphs and statistics. They practiced arguments and counter-arguments. They tried to think of every question the council might ask and prepare perfect answers. But Jake knew that speeches and statistics wouldn't matter. The council had access to all the data about humanity. They knew human history better than humans did themselves. They had watched humanity's entire development. They didn't need more information. What they needed was a reason to change their minds. What they needed was something that would make them question whether taking Earth had been the right decision. The night before their appearance, Jake couldn't sleep. He floated in his small cabin and stared at the walls. Tomorrow he would stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Tomorrow he would speak for every human who had ever lived. Tomorrow he would either win back Earth or condemn humanity to slow extinction in the cold darkness of space. Karen found him there in the darkness. She floated into the cabin and sat beside him in silence for a while. Finally she spoke. "You're going to do great tomorrow. You always find the right words when it matters." Jake shook his head. "I don't know what to say to them. How do you convince gods that humans deserve a second chance? How do you argue with beings who have seen civilizations rise and fall for 50,000 years? What could I possibly say that they haven't heard a million times before?" Karen smiled slightly. "Tell them the truth. Tell them what happened after they took Earth. Tell them how we survived. Tell them that humanity refuses to accept extinction. That's something they've never seen before. That's something even gods might find interesting." Jake thought about her words. She was right. The council expected humans to beg. They expected desperation and pleas for mercy. But humanity had earned something better than mercy. They had earned respect. And tomorrow Jake would make sure the council understood that. Morning came too quickly. The crew gathered in the docking bay, dressed in their best uniforms. They looked at each other with a mixture of fear and determination. Then they boarded the transport that would take them to the council chamber. The moment of truth had arrived. The council chamber was designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. It succeeded perfectly. The space was enormous, large enough to hold entire buildings inside it. Light came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The chamber was filled with beings that represented hundreds of different species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that looking at them for too long made Jake's head hurt. All of them radiated power that came from thousands of years of advancement and authority. At the center of the chamber stood the High Arbiter. It was a being made of crystal that seemed to glow from within. When it thought, colors swirled in the air around its body. It spoke, and translation devices rendered its words into flat English that had no emotion. Humanity. You stand before the council to challenge the quarantine of your homeworld. State your case. Jake and his crew had spent days preparing speeches and presentations. They had graphs and statistics ready. They had carefully crafted arguments based on logic and law. Jake looked at all their preparations and made a decision. He threw everything away and spoke from his heart instead. You took our planet. 3 billion people disappeared in an instant. You did it to protect yourselves from us, to protect the galaxy from what we might become. I understand that. I understand the logic. You've watched civilizations for 50,000 years. You've seen species like us before. You've watched some of them burn out and others become dangerous. You made a decision based on all that experience. Jake paused. He looked around at the assembled powers of the galaxy. Beings that could destroy stars. Beings that had built artificial worlds. Beings that had maintained peace for longer than humans had existed. But here's what you didn't account for. When you took Earth, you didn't kill us. You thought you were being kind. You thought you were preserving our homeworld until we either matured or died out. But 1 billion of us were living away from Earth. You took our planet and left us floating in space. And we didn't die. We survived. The colonies weren't designed to be independent. We had maybe a year of supplies. Our infrastructure depended completely on Earth. By every logical calculation, we should have collapsed within months. You predicted that. Your computer models showed it. Clean extinction with no survivors to complicate your moral decisions, but we didn't die. We adapted. We innovated. We broke every rule of sustainable development. We made impossible solutions work through pure stubbornness. 6 months ago, we were refugees with no hope. Today, we're thriving. Not because we're smarter than other species. Not because we're more advanced. But because we refuse to accept that survival isn't possible. The Arbiter's colors shifted in patterns that might have meant interest or curiosity. You speak of survival as if it proves virtue. Many dangerous species survive. Some of the worst civilizations in galactic history survived for centuries. Survival alone proves nothing about whether humanity deserves our trust. It proves we're worth the risk. Jake's voice grew stronger. You've built this entire civilization on caution, on controlling every variable, on eliminating threats before they can emerge. It's made you safe. I respect that. But it's also made you stagnant. When was the last time anything truly new happened in your perfect galaxy? A murmur rippled through the chamber. Nobody spoke to the council like this. Ever. Several alien delegates shifted in their seats. Some looked angry. Others looked intrigued. The Arbiter's colors swirled faster. Look at us. Jake gestured to his crew. We're flying in a ship held together by improvised welds and desperate engineering. We traveled across the galaxy using technology we barely understand. We're here because we decided that impossible odds just meant we needed to try harder. That's not dangerous. That's what life requires. That's what keeps species from becoming comfortable and dying out. You want to know if we'll be good galactic citizens? If we'll follow your rules and stay in our corner and never cause problems? I can't promise that. What I can promise is that humanity will never stop pushing forward. We'll never stop trying to improve. We'll never accept that anything is truly impossible. Maybe that scares you. Maybe it should. But it's also exactly what this galaxy needs. Give us back Earth. Let us prove that survival and cooperation aren't opposites. Let us show you that ambition doesn't have to mean aggression. Or keep our planet locked away and watch us build a new civilization from scratch right here in your galaxy. Either way, humanity isn't disappearing. We're here to stay. The only question is whether you want us as partners or as problems. Silence filled the enormous chamber. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The Arbiter's colors cycled through complex patterns that might have been deep thought or intense emotion, or something humans had no words for. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, the Arbiter spoke again. The Council will deliberate on what you have said. This is not a decision we make lightly. The protocols that quarantined your world have never been challenged successfully. You are asking us to question systems that have maintained galactic stability for millennia. We will consider your words. You will have our answer. The humans were dismissed. As Jake led his crew from the chamber, he felt dozens of alien eyes following them. Some of those gazes felt hostile. Others felt curious. A few might have even felt respectful. With aliens, it was impossible to know for sure. Back in their assigned quarters, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. Helen collapsed into a chair. Henry poured drinks from their limited supply of alcohol. Karen sat beside Jake and they both stared at the wall in exhausted silence. Do you think it worked? Helen asked quietly. Do you think they'll give us Earth back? Jake shook his head slowly. I don't know. I said what needed to be said. I told them the truth about who we are. Whether that's enough, whether they'll listen, whether 50,000 years of caution can be overcome by one speech from a desperate human. I have no idea. We did our best, Karen said softly. That's all anyone could ask. Now we wait and see if our best was good enough. The waiting was the hardest part. The council deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of sitting in their quarters with nothing to do but worry. 3 days of second-guessing every word Jake had said. 3 days of wondering if he had doomed humanity with his defiance instead of saving them. They tried to stay busy. They explored the station where they were housed. They talked to the few aliens who would speak with them. They learned that not all council members agreed about what to do with humanity. Some wanted to maintain the quarantine. Others thought humans had earned a second chance. The debate had apparently been intense. On the morning of the 4th day, they received a message. The council had reached a decision. Humanity would have its answer. Jake and his crew were summoned back to the chamber. As they walked through the corridors to the chamber, none of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. In a few minutes, they would learn humanity's fate. Either Earth would be returned or it wouldn't. Either humans would have a future among the stars or they would slowly die out in their scattered colonies. Everything depended on what the council decided. The chamber doors opened. Jake took a deep breath and led his crew inside. This was the moment. This was where everything would be decided. He walked to the center of the chamber with his head held high. Whatever came next, humanity would face it standing tall. The council had deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of debate among beings who rarely disagreed. 3 days of questioning systems that had worked perfectly for 50,000 years. 3 days that felt like an eternity to the 15 humans waiting for an answer. Now Jake and his crew stood in the council chamber once again. The Arbiter's crystalline form glowed with colors that seemed calmer than before. The pattern suggested that a resolution had been reached. Whatever came next, the waiting was finally over. The council has reached a decision regarding humanity and the quarantine of your homeworld. The Arbiter's voice was flat and emotionless as always. Jake held his breath. Behind him, his crew did the same. This was the moment that would determine everything. In our 50,000 years of guiding galactic civilization, we have encountered many young species. Most follow predictable patterns. They expand, they mature, they integrate into our society. Some fail, destroying themselves before achieving stability. A rare few are judged too dangerous and must be contained. Humanity was flagged for containment based on expansion rates and technological development that exceeded safe parameters. The protocols are ancient. They were designed by our predecessors to protect galactic stability. They have been tested billions of times across thousands of civilizations. They have never been wrong. The Arbiter paused. Jake felt his heart sink into his stomach. This sounded like rejection. They were going to say no. Earth would remain locked away. Humanity would die slowly in scattered colonies across space. Until now. Jake's head snapped up. Had he heard correctly? Around him, his crew stirred with sudden hope. The protocols did not account for a species that would survive the loss of its homeworld through pure adaptation. They did not predict that scattered colonies would cooperate, rather than fight each other for resources. They did not foresee that humanity would reach this chamber not as beggars asking for mercy, but as equals demanding the return of what was taken. You survived what should have been extinction. More than survived. You thrived. In 6 months, you accomplished what takes most species decades to achieve. Not through superior technology, not through stored resources or careful planning, but through absolute refusal to accept limitations. This presents the Council with a situation we have never encountered. We took action based on what humanity might become in the future. You have shown us what you already are in the present. The question becomes simple. Do we maintain containment of a species that has already proven the containment was unnecessary? The Arbiter's colors brightened. The pattern almost looked like amusement, though Jake couldn't be sure. The Council votes to return Earth to normal space. The quarantine is lifted immediately. Your people will be restored to your homeworld. Furthermore, humanity is extended provisional membership in the Galactic Council. Full membership will be evaluated in 100 of your years. For a moment, nobody moved. The words were too big to process, too impossible to believe. Then Karen let out a shout that echoed through the massive chamber. Suddenly, the crew was hugging each other, crying, laughing, unable to contain their joy. Earth was coming home. Humanity had won. The Arbiter waited for the celebration to quiet down before continuing. Understand this clearly, humans. We return your world not because you asked politely, not because you begged convincingly. We return it because you proved that taking it was the wrong decision. You adapted to impossible circumstances. You built civilization from ruins. You came here not to plead but to state facts. That is why you have earned our respect. The galaxy needs species like yours. We have grown too comfortable, too safe, too predictable. You remind us that evolution requires risk, that progress demands the courage to defy limitations, that sometimes the most dangerous choice is eliminating all danger. Welcome to the galactic community, humanity. Try not to break too many of our rules. The journey home took another 6 months, but this time the victory flew with hope instead of desperation. Behind them came council ships carrying the technology and knowledge needed to restore Earth to its proper place in space. The aliens had promised to help humanity integrate into galactic society. They would share some of their advanced technology. They would teach humans how to travel between stars more efficiently. The galaxy was opening its doors. When they finally entered the solar system, Earth was already there. It sat in its proper orbit exactly as it had always been. Exactly where it belonged. As if the past year had been nothing but a terrible dream. But it hadn't been a dream. 3 billion people emerged from the temporal stasis confused and frightened. They had experienced no time passing. One moment they had been living normal lives. The next moment a year had jumped forward and they learned their planet had been stolen and returned. The scattered colonies celebrated wildly. Ships launched from Mars and the asteroid belt and Jupiter's moons, all heading home. Families reunited with loved ones they had thought lost forever. People cried tears of joy and relief. The nightmare was over. Earth had come back, but something had changed. The colonies had learned to survive on their own. Mars remained self-sufficient, continuing to grow its own food. The asteroid belt kept its innovations and new technologies. Europa's underwater farms continued to thrive and expand. Humanity had lost its cradle and learned to walk. Now that the cradle was back, nobody wanted to climb back inside and become helpless again. Jake stood on Gateway Station's observation deck once more. Below him, Earth spun in its ancient dance around the sun. But now when he looked at it, he wasn't looking at humanity's past. He was looking at humanity's future. A future that included Earth but wasn't limited to it. A future that reached out to the stars, to the galaxy, and to whatever lay beyond. Karen joined him with 2 cups of real coffee. Actual coffee grown on Earth, shipped up from the surface. The first delivery from home. It tasted better than anything Jake had experienced in the past year. Think they'll regret letting us join their club? Karen asked with a slight smile. Jake laughed. Probably. But they're not wrong about needing us. Somebody has to show them that impossible just means you haven't tried hard enough yet. Somebody has to remind them that playing it safe all the time isn't really living. That might as well be us. So what comes next for us? Next, we prove them right. We show the galaxy that humanity can be ambitious without being aggressive. That we can be independent while still cooperating. That we can push boundaries without breaking them. We build a civilization that makes taking Earth look like the smartest mistake the Council ever made. Below them, Earth continued its endless rotation. Blue oceans and green continents and white clouds. Above them, stars filled the darkness with infinite possibility. And somewhere between the two, humanity found its place in the universe, not perfect, not peaceful, not predictable, but undeniably, irrepressibly, magnificently human. 20 years passed. Humanity spread across a dozen star systems. They built new colonies on alien worlds. They carried with them all the lessons learned during Earth's absence. They built with redundancy, never putting everything in one place again. They innovated constantly, pushing boundaries that made the Council nervous and impressed at the same time. When the Council faced a crisis that their ancient wisdom couldn't solve, they knew who to call. When a dangerous artificial intelligence threatened 3 sectors of space, when conventional solutions failed and careful debate wasted precious time, they turned to the species that refused to accept impossible odds. They called humanity, the civilization that had survived catastrophe, the species that turned disaster into opportunity, the humans who would try anything if told it couldn't be done. Earth's disappearance had been the galaxy's greatest error, but it had also been its greatest gift, because now the galaxy had humanity as partners, and nothing would ever be impossible again.